if there is going to be a weak point for DAMWON in the laning phase, it would be there. Maybe Viper just finds a new level. Welcome everybody to another episode of WCG Close Up. This is the World's Finals preview, the special episode here for the World Championship of League of Legends. I am Valdes, with me is Wolf once again, and we have had an incredible semifinals so far. It has been so back and forth. We've had 10 games total out of the 10 possible. And we finally got our two teams into the finals, DAMWON versus EDG. Obviously, DAMWON are the big favorites coming into this. And yeah, I mean, that really sets the stage, right? Like, EDG are coming in. They had to fight through Gen G. It wasn't a very clean series, but they made it happen. And there's always a chance, right? They're coming in here as heavy underdogs, but I'm curious to think about and to see how they could potentially challenge DAMWON here.
Yeah, because it's a matchup where you obviously favor DAMWON. I think most people favor DAMWON just on paper, based on results and based on DAMWON not dropping a single game until they hit T1, right? In the semifinals, they were extremely dominant. Whereas on the other side of the bracket, EDG had to go to a 5th game against RNG. And then that was like the opposite of the Gen G game, where they had completely different styles of play to RNG. RNG is hyper aggressive, they're super passive. Then they changed their style a little bit. We're a little bit more aggressive in that Gen G series. And then now they're going against DAMWON KIA, who love to just play slow and safe, but then punish you every time you make a mistake. Like, DAMWON's a punishing team, so in some ways, I think because EDG doesn't take a lot of risks in the early game, you're not going to find yourself at a 4,000 or 5,000 gold deficit at 20 minutes, like we've seen a lot of teams have ended up against DAMWON. But on the other hand, it's also a team I think doesn't have a lot of clutch factor in terms of late game team fights, where I think DAMWON KIA always does. And DAMWON KIA's team fighting, no matter what the composition is just way better than them overall. So it's hard to find a way where you can be aggressive early game, because that's too risky. DAMWON will punish you. But if you play too slow, like, they'll win the longer game anyways, because they're always going to win those clutch team fights around objectives.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my impression as well. Everybody's, I think Vedius was very vocal on the desk many times, saying that DAMWON is by far the best team fighting team in the world. And, that's kind of what we saw in the LCK, even in some of the matches that they had against their peers over there in the LCK, against Gen G, in Spring, where it was like, oh, we got so far behind. And then Gen G, they thought they had it in the bag, but then DAMWON basically played perfect League of Legends for 20 minutes, and Gen G made like one mistake, 1.5 mistakes. Like, I don't even, it was just barely enough, that one mistake, and then DAMWON are immediately back in the game. And we had that as well against T1, where it was like, T1 were supposed to win the game, and then all of a sudden, like, DAMWON were just able to come back, and it just feels like you can never make any mistakes. You have to be perfect. And in a late game scenario, especially what we saw out of EDG against Gen G, where it was like, a lot of times there was a lot of flipping over objectives, especially from Gen G. I think EDG were very good at capitalizing on some of those mistakes. But like, DAMWON are also a team that, when they're ahead, they're not going to take unnecessary risk. They do it sometimes if like the series is like 2-0 and they're like,
there are some happy games, yeah.
Yeah. let's pick Kassadin and Renekton. I'm sure we'll be fine. 5 melee champs. But at the end of the day, generally, especially like in a world final, I think these guys will take it to the next level in terms of not trying to have happy games. I would expect that, especially if they get ahead, they will capitalize and not make any mistakes, and EDG will have a lot of trouble. And even though DAMWON aren't super over-aggressive in the early game or anything like that, they are extremely clean, so it's going to be a challenge there as well to even get leads, I would say, for EDG. You just got to hope that DAMWON get a little bit happy in some of their games, right, as you put it. Otherwise, I think you're going to be struggling a lot.
I feel like RNG is the type of team that is so aggressive all the time, and is a team that can be the type of team I think that could topple DAMWON potentially, the same way T1 is a very aggressive early game team, and they're very good at it. They're very measured at their aggression, and that's, I think, part of the reason why DAMWON struggled against RNG at MSI. And when you look at EDG and how opposite they are, yes, they ended up beating RNG, but doesn't mean necessarily they're the better of the two teams that could have faced against DAMWON KIA. And I think, the reason why everyone was saying that it's a 3-0 for DAMWON, whether Gen G goes or whether EDG goes, is just because they're both so similar in terms of how they play that that they're not really going to throw a wrench in the gear. And you have a week, right, to prepare. And that means that, DAMWON KIA are probably trying to adjust how they're playing, trying to expand some of their champion pools, maybe a little bit, prepare a strategy for, just one game isolated on red side, they might have to play. And for EDG, it's, I think, so difficult to change how you play the early game to try to get advantages with only 1 week of time to actually prepare for DAMWON KIA. And, that for that reason alone, like, I think a lot of people are excited, like, let's see what they bring, like, what's going to happen? And I'm like, I don't know if they'll be able to change it. Maybe they don't even try to change it. They try to do something else because it's just so difficult to completely 180 the playstyle you've been playing all year.
Yeah, I think it's just impossible, right? Like, there's a very famous chronicler copy pasta that's going around nowadays after after the final or the semifinal between Gen G and EDG.
The Renekton, the Azir, the random choices, the flips for objectives, and the worst part is Gen G will never learn because they have gotten so good at it. And it's driving me nuts, okay?
And it was him getting so frustrated at Gen G because individually they're such a strong team. They have incredible talent within their players. But at the end of the day, they've gotten away with playing the same style for so long because it works to a certain extent. But it doesn't win you championships because the better teams eventually will just figure out that style. It's very predictable, and you're just going to lose. And it's so frustrating because they get so close over and over and over, but then they can't make it, right? And same thing has happened now. I don't think EDG quite has that level of predictability or are that stuck in their ways, but they are stuck in their ways. Like, it's not Gen G level, but it's EDG level, and there were a lot of memes going around about that as well, with how similar the two teams are. So I do agree, I think it's going to be rough, but we've gone a little bit on about, what we expect from the two teams, but maybe we should take a look at some of the matchups as well, and just talk about what we think about some of the players that are coming in. I think that the big highlight is definitely going to be on the mid jungle, but is there any specific matchup that you're excited for, Wolf?
I think Flandre versus Khan is fun in terms of a historical sense because Khan is the oldest player in the LCK, and this is going to be his last best of 5 professionally, his last games of League of Legends, assuming he doesn't return to play after his military service. And Flandre is the player who's played in the LPL the longest. He started in 2014, who hadn't made a Worlds before this tournament. So it's like two very experienced players clashing against each other. Flandre's first Worlds and Khan's last Worlds. And I think that's kind of a cool storyline to kind of hone in on. In terms of the 1v1 there, I do expect Khan to get the edge. I think Flandre has kind of underperformed overall this tournament. Outside of the group stage, I thought the group stage he was very good, but then in that RNG series and even in the Gen G series yesterday, for us, right, by the time this video is coming out, it's been a little while, but it was not his best play, whereas I think Khan is playing very well. Maybe some would even say an upgrade over Nuggery. Just some might say that. But
some maybe one, yeah.
But yeah, I think that matchup is not where you're going to find success. And like you said, the mid jungle is where everyone's focused because it is where they dismantled Gen G. It's where BDD fell apart. And BDD was just not able to play the game. Like the game 4 game, he was so gapped early after those 2 kills that it was like, well, you just can't even actually lane. I don't think that will happen to Showmaker, and I think Canyon is a much better jungler than Clit is, and DAMWON will not take those fights around the Raptors for no reason. They won't do that. So, I hope that people don't misidentify that the leads that Scout got in games 4 and 5 are because he was like suddenly like in clutch mode and way better than BDD, because that's just simply not true. Like, he got free advantages.
Very free. And it wasn't even just kills, like it was teleports that were thrown away as well. Like it was just a couple of decisions that were almost instinctual in nature because it was obvious they didn't plan it. It was very off the cuff, like, let's go in, we could probably win this, and then it all fell apart. And if you're getting advantages like that, it's just massive, because then Scout not only has 2 kills, but he has entire lane control with the summoner advantage, the teleport. It's like, the game is over almost from there. Like, if that were solo queue, people would be calling for 15 surrenders, like 15-minute surrenders. That is very likely to mental boom you, right? But as you mentioned, you know, I don't think that's going to happen here. And, you know, Canyon and Showmaker are being talked about nowadays as not only the best mid-jungle duo now, but maybe one of the best mid-jungle duos of all time. And based on what we're expecting, it does feel like DAMWON are going to win this final, and they're going to have 2 world finals together under their belt. And I hope that DAMWON are sticking together, or at least those 2. You know, we never know what will happen with contract negotiations and stuff like that. Always a fun time for many reasons towards the end of the year, but you know, hopefully those 2 stay together and they can continue their dynasty, because it's really becoming one. And you know, although Scout and JJ, they had some really nice play, some really insane plays at times, like they were really showing their stuff up against Gen G. They were part of the reason that, you know, when Gen G were making mistakes, those 2 were clutch in the moments, able to capitalize on those mistakes and make good plays. And, you know, not falter later on in the game or anything like that. So if there were going to be a mid-jungle duo, wasn't going to be Faker and Owner to get it done, maybe it could be those 2. Definitely favoring Canyon and Showmaker, though. I'm definitely on the, you know, the Dynasty hype train with these 2. Yeah. And really curious to see how far they can push it, right? Because especially with a lot of people hyped up for this matchup, if Canyon and Showmaker just come in and stomp them, it's like another notch on your belt, right? It's like, oh yeah, like more easy dispatching of another insane mid-jungle duo.
Yeah, I mean, people are kind of making a comparison to Faker Bengi a lot. Like that's the kind of word that goes around always. And obviously Faker is still a pro today. Bengi is since retired and been a coach and stuff like that. But I think that it's a little bit soon to make those comparisons, but if they do dominate, then I mean the conversation is going to continue. The other thing I want to put out about this finals, I think, is that assuming that our predictions come true, right, and we do end up seeing DAMWON, you know, take this out, maybe even with a 3-0. That's, you know, kind of my prediction. It was not as tough as that was winning the semis. And it's not as impressive as a run, I think, because I think this Worlds was not as competitive for DAMWON as it was last year, I would argue, even. So I don't want to say this Worlds doesn't count, because obviously every Worlds counts, but I want to make sure fans like slow down a little bit on the hype train for DAMWON. Let's see what happens after this Worlds and what happens during LCK next year, because the LCK has seen so much growth. We saw in summer, like, unbelievable rises of teams like Nongshim, right? And even Sandbox growing up quite a bit. So I'm excited about that. The last matchup we have to talk about, of course, is a bot duo. And this is, I think, where a lot of people will be pointing fingers. I'm sure the analyst desk is going to break this one down a lot when we end up going to that finals, because at MSI, the bot duo of DAMWON KIA, and throughout a lot of you know, summer season for LCK, they were the odd lane out. They were the lane that was struggling. They were the lane that was a liability oftentimes. But I personally feel that at Worlds, they have played very well. And we've seen even 2v2 kills go through. We're seeing them like dominate lane, whereas that was kind of the biggest issue for them a lot of the time back at MSI. I would give the edge to Viper over Ghost, but in terms of the 2v2, I think it's a lot closer than you would think if you had just heard like the stories of Barrel, you know, Genshin Impact, blah blah blah. Like it's actually a really close matchup, I think, and it's not one that you can just default to giving Viper. And before the tournament, I would have, like, if somebody asked me, and EDG were my big favorites to win the whole thing, not anymore, but if somebody asked me a few weeks ago, like, yo, Viper versus Ghost, who you got? I'd be like, well, 100% Viper. Now I'm like, it's very hard to actually definitively say.
Yeah, especially in the AD carry matchup. I think it is very, very close. I think that Ghost, when the pressure was on, he played a couple things. Like, they gave him some picks, right, Jhin and Draven, that he is pretty comfortable on. There were some moments where he, in the height of the intensity of the battle, he just got, you know, I think he got knocked up one time by Yasuo and failed to use both of his summoners, didn't get to flash a couple times in some of those T1 wins. But he's definitely been playing above what we saw, at least in the beginning of the tournament even, or, you know, before we came to this tournament. So that's definitely a big boon. We got to see what kind of supports Mako's going to play as well. Will he be playing Engage supports? Will he be playing Enchanter supports? I saw all over Twitter yesterday Everybody was begging for engaged supports. That's the kind of player he is. Not necessarily to highlight Viper, but just for himself and for pressure on the map. And funnily enough, that's what Beryl made a big name for himself for in 2020, right? He was like the best guy for doing that. And then other supports have since, you know, I don't want to say copy, because Beryl's not the first person to ever do this, but they've
emulated, I guess.
Yeah, emulated. They incorporated that style into their play, and they have seen a lot of success from that. And Mako, even before Beryl, was doing that as well. So, you know, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be looking for that. Maybe he can throw kind of a wrench into the works, even outside of the lane. But yeah, Ghost and Beryl have been standing up really well. Definitely will be if there is going to be a weak point for DAMWON in the laning phase, it would be there. And just curious to see if Viper, you know, can kind of, you know, he's been throughout his career trying to reach those high highs. He was, you know, on Griffin, he was on Hama Life then, which was kind of a disaster, went over to EDG, and now he's actually here at the World Finals. So maybe Viper just finds a new level.
I don't want to say coin flippy, but there were some extremely great moments for him in that semifinals, and also some very low points for him, especially on the Lucian. I thought in lane, like, this is a terrifying player. Like, this guy, if you give Nami Lucian to Viper Mako, it's like not a good idea. I think DAMWON KIA should not allow that to happen at all costs. Because I think that is a lane where Viper will dominate. And he was like flashing forward for kills. He looked amazing. But then he was like flashing forward and dying, and he was like, his Lucian started off really good, and then it started to fall apart when he was going forward too much, being too aggressive, because Lucian's really low range. So, I really find it difficult to actually sum up how I feel about Viper potentially, because I think he has so much clutch potential, but he also needs to tone down a lot of those mistakes. That's something I think you can work on in a week's time. I think that if the coaching staff is like, hey, like, just slow it down. Like, you're 4 kills up. You don't have to flash into 3 people. You can just keep winning the game with us.
Yeah. Maybe he was just limit testing a little bit, you know? Like, up against Genji, he's like, how far can I push this lead that I got? And maybe he'll be a little bit more balanced against DAMWON, because he absolutely will have to be. You know, if you thought some of the catches that we saw out of some of the players on Genji, like BDD Seraphine or stuff like that, were cool. You gotta watch some DAMWON play, because they are some of the quickest players that we do have. And like we said in the beginning, you know, they love to capitalize on mistakes. So if Viper's gonna do that, then he won't be reaching a new level, or perhaps it will be a lower level, unfortunately for him. But
DAMWON's looking to get some new skins, all right? So gonna have to change the champion pool a little bit. But let's talk about our official predictions, because I think I've made my mind pretty clear. I'm going 3-0 DAMWON KIA. For all the reasons we've talked about, I just don't think that EDG will be able to change stylistically enough to capitalize on early game fast enough to be able to compete with DAMWON. And changing how you team fight late game, that takes some teams years to do. So that's definitely not going to happen in a week's time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the same page, right? What we saw before from Genji versus DAMWON, even earlier on in the year, Genji really haven't changed as a team. And from what we saw from EDG versus Genji, 2 very similar teams. I think that DAMWON are, you know, even in a rock, paper, scissors sense, I think that they kind of have the number of teams that play this very slow style. They're going to get ahead of you, and they will capitalize on your mistakes. And I think I'll also have to go 3-0. I think, you know, I was thinking, you know, maybe does EDG get 1 game? But the more I think about it, I don't think they're clean enough to really challenge DAMWON at this point in time. And I think the idea that the semifinal of T1 versus DAMWON being the true final in terms of the skill level of the teams and how they match up, I think is pretty true at this point in time. So we've got our official predictions out there. Anything else, Wolf, that you want to say before this final?
I just want everyone in the comments to comment what you guys' predictions are going into this, or ridicule us if you're watching this video after the finals and EDG won. Feel free to attack us and challenge us.
Yeah, that's what these
not gonna
videos are
happen.
all. That's what these videos are all about, right? To get your voice out there, and yeah, make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the WCG channel. Always a pleasure doing these videos, but I think that's gonna do it for me and Wolf here for WCG Close Up for the World's Finals preview. I hope you guys did enjoy it, and I hope that we all can enjoy the finals together. Should be an awesome matchup. But that's going to do it for us, guys. Thank you once again for watching, and we'll see you next time on WCG Close Up. Have a good day.